Okay, so this is going to be part one of a two-part video to remove your dashboard. I'm going to start with the steering wheel airbag and the steering wheel. There are two screws that you need to remove the airbag. Before doing so, make sure you disconnect the battery for at least 15 minutes before doing this. Get yourself a T27 Torx. You're going to turn the steering wheel so the screw is actually facing the floor of the car. It's easier to access. I didn't do it here, just so I could show you. You're also going to extend the wheel as much as you can towards you to give you more room. And you're going to remove the one T27 screw here, and there's one on the opposite side as well. Lots of these parts are removed already and replaced, just so I could show you how to do it a little more easily without cursing. So after you remove those two T27s, the airbag comes out. You're going to remove the airbag connector. It's not as easy as that. You maybe want to get a flathead screwdriver underneath there and gently remove that. Then you're going to remove the additional two connectors inside the steering wheel for the horn and the, I guess, the blinkers. Maybe. That's one of them. That's the other one. Then you're going to get I believe it's a 27 millimeter socket to remove the nut. You're just going to loosen that nut first. You're going to loosen it up a little. You could hold on to the steering wheel while you do it. It's only 37 foot-pounds, I believe. And then you're going to pull the steering wheel towards you to release it from the splines on the steering column. And you leave that nut on there so you're not going to hit yourself in the face with the steering wheel when it pops off. So you can break that steering wheel from the splines, and you'll unscrew the nut further, remove the nut and the washer. And then the steering wheel, gently run those wires through the hole in the steering wheel there. Now you'll notice I taped the clock spring here. You want to do that so it's not flopping around. You also want to be careful. There's a couple of plastic tabs that are very easy to break. I broke one. I re-glued it. Seems to work. Then we're going to go to the ignition trim here. You just get your trim removal tool, get underneath there, and it pops off. It's just a rubber piece of trim. And then next we're going to go to the steering column cowls there. They're two smaller Torx screws. They're quite small. And you remove those. There's two screws, one on each side. Here's one. One, and then one on the opposite side. You don't want to take these screws and put them in little plastic baggies and label them so you know where they all go back. After you get the side screws out, you're going to go to the front of the cowl or the front of the trim, and there's 4 Phillips head screws that hold the front of the trim in. 2 are removed already. I'm removing the remaining 2. Fast motion. And this is pulled over the front. Next we're going to split the remaining 2 trim pieces here. They split in half, top and bottom piece. Top comes off. There'll be 2 rubber grommets remaining on the stalks. They stay there. And this is the bottom piece that comes off. Next we'll go to the left vent. There's 2 T20s on the outside of the vent. upper, one lower. And for the headlamp switch, you pull it out, and there's a little release tab underneath you get with a flathead screwdriver. You insert the screwdriver, and it releases the switch. And there's another T20 screw hiding in there in the headlamp switch. That's removed already, but I'll show you where it is. T20 in there. And then you get your pry tool and pry that left side vent out. It's a little tight. You have to be a little careful that you don't break any of the vent parts. It's pretty snug in here because of the headlamp switch. Here's the headlamp switch. There's a small connector you disconnect first. And then the larger headlamp switch, you separate the black piece from the orange piece and get a flathead screwdriver in there, gently separate it because it is in there pretty tight. And it's extra difficult to do holding a camera as well. After you get that switch unplugged, the whole assembly comes out. Now I'm going to go to the gauge cluster. Behind the microphone cover, there's one screw you need to get out. That's one Torx screw back there. And then you're going to go over to the hazard light switch. The hazard light switch pops out. Then there's a white connector back there. There's two tabs that you pinch on the left and right, and as you pinch them, you pull it out with a needle nose. It's a little more difficult than what's shown there, but you'll get it out. And then behind there, there's another Torx screw that you need to unscrew. After that, you get your pry tool underneath and pry up the cluster gauge, or gauge cluster. Now, I didn't show this in a video, but behind the gauge cluster, there's three electrical connectors that connect to the gauges. It's a blue, white, and black one on my car. There's a little lock you need to press and roll back, and then they unlock and they'll pop off the connector. This is the back of the hazard light. There's a little connector there, little tab. You push it off to the right and pull the connector towards you to dislodge it from the cluster gauge cluster, whichever order it is, cluster gauge cluster. And then your cluster gauge comes out. Here's the three connectors, one blue, white, and black. And you see the little tabs at the top there that roll back and allows them to be disconnected. Now we're going to take the rest of the trim off the steering column. There's two Torx screws which release this last piece here. This piece is a little tricky. It's split in half, so you have to kind of open it and work it around the steering column, being careful not to break it. But it has a fair amount of flex to it, so it's possible to get it off there. You'll see me do it here. It's a couple of clips that allow it to pop out, and then you kind of squeeze it around the column here, being careful not to disturb a lot of the wires that run along the steering column. Next I'll go to the center console. It's probably easier to do if you remove your stereo first because it's pretty tight in there. So it might be easier if you get your stereo out first. There's a couple of release tabs on the stereo. You pull it out, release a couple of wire clips in the back. Here I'm starting with the left control panel. Pry it out, it just pops out. You pry it out with your pry tool. Those switches are custom switches I had put in place of the dummy switches that are in there usually. So that won't be in your car. You'll go ahead and remove that yellow clip on the top, which is a little stubborn. Sometimes you have to get in there with a flathead screwdriver or a pry tool to get that clip off. And then remove the cigarette lighter on the bottom. That's keyed so it only can go back one way. Put that trim piece aside and move to the other trim piece on the right. Pull that out with your trim tool and you'll see 3 clips, one pink, green, and yellow. First I'll remove the, I had put a USB port in here on the bottom, taking those connectors off, then move to the purple or pink, green, and yellow tabs here, connectors. And on the side of this trim piece there should be a key, or they're marked with colors so you know where to put them back. There's your pink, green, and yellow marks there. Put that aside. There's 4 screws that hold this whole trim piece in. 1, 2. It's the second one. Third one here. Fourth, they've been removed already. Then you get your pry tool and pull that out. And disconnect the connectors to the back of the HVAC. I think there's 4 connectors right there. Yellow, red, black, and I think another one. I'll move to the speakers. This is the left speaker. There's 2 screws holding the speaker in. T20. If you just get a socket in there because it's kind of tight. The one behind it, I just used the T20 bit to get in there. I was able to unscrew it with my finger. And then the speaker pops up and there's a clip on the right side there. Goes underneath the dash. Turn it over and unclip the electrical connector. That's also keyed. Can only go back one way. Most of these clips are all keyed, so you won't have a problem putting them back. Then you go over and do the right side as well. This concludes part 1 of the dashboard removal. Look for part 2. I'll be removing the passenger side airbag, other dashboard components, and then on to removing the dashboard. Thanks for watching.